the focusing on in and out or rising, falling method that we just employed, and the other one that I'm familiar with of counting the breaths.
Yes, and if we had more time, I was actually thinking of closing with giving you all what is sometimes considered an advanced practice in a number of traditions, and I can tell you what it is, and you're welcome to play with it on your own. Because I also know a lot of practitioners who question the wisdom of reserving it as something like once you've done 3 years of zazen, then you can do what is called shikantaza in Japanese, which is a Japanese rendering of a Chinese Chan term, not that anybody cares. You take your meditation posture as always. You center yourself, you leave your eyes open, and then you do nothing. That's it. That's the practice. You don't have an object of meditation in that practice. You don't follow the breath. You don't observe sensations. You don't even close your eyes and go inward. You also don't stare out into the room. You just, it's often called just sit or just sitting. You literally just sit and do nothing. And in Zen, they teach that practice is itself the perfect expression of enlightenment. And it doesn't matter if you start thinking about cartoons you watched when you were 7 years old, or what you're going to, the fudge cake that's in the refrigerator that you're going to have after the meditation. Whatever comes up is whatever comes up, and you don't cling to any of it, but you don't fight with any of it. You don't do anything with any of it. You know, there's an old saying, you know, like supposedly attributed to a farmer or something like that. Sometimes sits and thinks, but mostly just sits. And that's the ideal there. Carl Jung, there's a story told about Jung that he went to the American West and met a number of Native Americans. I think they may have been Hopi, but they could have been Apache. And he noticed that several of them were sitting, you know, on rocks, looking very comfortable and relaxed and silent. They weren't speaking to each other. They weren't doing anything in particular. They were just sitting there. And eventually, Jung, curious fellow that he was, walked over to them and he said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, might I ask you what you are thinking about?" And one of the Native Americans kind of like slowly looked at him and he said, "Why, nothing." And Jung was startled, because in his experience, most Westerners don't know how to do that, how to actually let the mind be still and empty naturally without trying, without making a discipline out of it. But that is, so shikantaza is sort of a bridge between the more formal kinds of meditations that we've been looking at and that natural state of the mind being clear and empty when thinking is not needed. And this is a long-winded way of answering your question, which is that the counting of the breath is usually considered a preliminary practice. It's if you go to a Zen center, it's often the first thing they'll have you do. I had that experience. It's a perfectly fine practice. It's usually that you count the breaths up to 10 and then start over again at 1. That's probably the most common form of it, though there are others. The thing is that the count, my sense of it is that the count keeps you in the conceptual mind a bit more, even though in or out or rising, falling are words and therefore also conceptual. In my experience, they seem to be, counting is a thing we learn as children. And when we count, we tend to count, I think. And the awareness of the breath is maybe a little less distinct. So it's a subtle difference. And as with all of these practices, whatever works for you. If you find that, you're going in, out, in, out, in Barney Miller, in, what was that show? And you're losing it because it's too subtle, then, and counting will help you stay with it, then by all means use a 10 count or a 5 count or whatever works. I'm a big believer in trying on. It's like going into a shoe store and trying on shoes until you find a pair that really fits and you like how they look and they're comfortable and the balance is right and all of that. Find the practices that work for you, and when you do, then you've really got something.
So I do have one more question I'd like your thoughts on real quick.
Sure.
So one challenge that I'm facing is that I've found that my ability to think about business situations in which I need to gauge the intentions of somebody else, I find it difficult for me to properly kind of tune my intuition to what these people have said and basically reviewing a social interaction in my head, because I find it very hard to distance myself from my own emotionality around that. So my question is, do you think a meditation technique could create a state in which, like, you could disassociate yourself from a memory and then reapproach it perhaps at the end of a meditation session and say, okay, now I'm going to try to have a fresh view of this thing that I've been thinking about?
So you're asking in terms of after the event, after you've had the meeting, the contact with the person, evaluating it when you're on your own later.
Yeah, I've told you about all kinds of disastrous business situations I found myself in because I didn't listen to my intuition correctly, because I didn't trust it. And
that what you're asking about may well be workable, but I feel like, if there was one, they would drum me out of the meditation teachers union if I didn't emphasize that bringing mindfulness into the meeting and being more fully present, but with a degree of detachment in the moment of the encounter, might allow your intuition to be more on track while it's happening than in the reconstruction of memory later on, when the mind has already chewed on it for a bit. The two are not at odds with each other. I don't mean to suggest that. I would just say, I would probably say, try them both. See if you play with meditation, if that becomes a part of your day or your week or whatever, you may find, without even deliberately changing anything, that your intuition is operating a little differently in a number of different contexts. but certainly if you're going into a meeting, I like to tell this story. It's like I can find an application for Star Trek or the Beatles for absolutely anything. I remember, maybe around 2004 or 5, something like that, watching Paul McCartney on television. I think he was on Larry King with his then wife, Heather, and whom he later divorced. And they had been working on a campaign in Canada to stop the slaughter of baby seals. And the network had a representative of the Canadian government who was pro killing baby seals, and why it was good for Canadian commerce and all of that, and how we have too many seals anyways and they pollute the environment, or whatever it was he was saying. And I was I was watching McCartney and his wife. They were sitting side by side, and I remember thinking, Paul's doing something. I said, and I had discussed meditation with him, and I knew he was a regular meditator. And I said, like, it was like I could see him go inside. I could see him like breathe and calm himself, because the guy was trying to provoke him. He was trying to get a reaction so he could say, like, see these, liberal billionaire celebrities and all of this kind of stuff. And McCartney came back with like perfect poise, and he said, "No, minister, that is not actually the case." And he had like facts at his fingertips. And his wife was losing it. She was like, she wanted to get a club and beat him to death. And I thought, interesting how he used his meditation training to engage. Actually, it's like by being detached, he was more present in the situation and able to respond not from raw emotion. So you may find similarly, if you cultivate mindfulness in your daily life, that it works for you in those situations. And if it doesn't, or if it does, you may also want to then, it could be very useful to review those encounters afterwards and see what comes up, because you might, the mind is a tricky thing. You might notice something afterwards that wasn't on your radar when you were having the conversation. That's also possible.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I seek to deploy some of it for anger control myself. I think it's very important to at least develop a reflex to stop before you react, because I recently found myself overreacting in a business context, and now I'm dealing with the fallout of it.
Yeah, there are a lot of practical applications to meditation.
I'm trying to learn how to calm myself when I get anxious over, life. Sick, people sick within the family. I told you my situation. Close friend, that's a huge help. Always there, moving, learning, people are ill or sick, or the nurse might leave, or, or cut a day, or different things. And trying just to calm my nerves so I don't have like feeling like my nerves are alive inside me, and it take control of me. And just calming my body. That's what I've been. It's hard to get into a practice of something. I've been doing, as I said to you, yoga for years, and the pandemic kind of got in between, but now I'm on track on Zoom with an instructor that I'm is terrific at trying. I've been going once a week now for a few months. I'm trying to get my second day in. I was going before 2-3 times a week when I could. Now I'm trying to struggle to find that second time, that habit where I'll remember, where it fits the schedule, where I won't be interrupted, and find that, and then try to lead myself into more mindfulness and kind of meditate. That's what I was looking for with the meditation, learning how to control my anxiety, because as somebody said to me, it's real. The things that I'm concerned about are very real, but but I have to learn how not to let it make me overly anxious or sick.
Yes. Yes. Of course, meditation and yoga go together like hand in glove, and they complement each other very well. In some ways, they are kind of they are working with the same forces, but the balance is different. In Hatha Yoga, the physical predominates and the mindfulness is secondary. In meditation, the mindfulness is primary and the role of the body is secondary. But in both cases, both elements are working together. And when you harmonize body, breath, and mind, whether in meditation or in yoga or in Tai Chi or something else, that's when the three centers, the thinking, feeling, and moving centers, align with each other and coordinate, so that, because part of what is happening there when anxiety gets out of control is that the feeling center has gotten to, it's out of proportion, it's out of balance in your experience. And so grounding, bringing yourself back into the body, whether with the breath or through movement, can, or both, can be very helpful in,
that's what I've been
reducing.
I used to, be more active, having loads of activities used to help take my mind off things. And unfortunately, hopefully they will be coming back over time. But it's also very important to learn how to, from within yourself, do it, and not to rely on other things to sidetrack you.
Right.
So.
The other thing that I'll suggest, drawing a borrowing from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, is when difficult, I'll use that word, when difficult feelings are present in the body and mind, rather than trying to stop them, block them, fight them, is to welcome them with loving kindness at the heart, to treat them as teachers and friends. This is a difficult, can be a difficult practice. And if it feels too hard, then drop it. But if it's like just a little bit of anxiety, you might want to sort of almost take it like a fledgling in your hands, as it were, and what is this feeling I'm having, and welcome that feeling and allow it to speak to you, to unfold its nature and reveal what it's all about. Because this way we make these qualities that we think are dark or problematic, that we'd rather not have, instead of having the tension within us of this is here but I don't want it, we welcome it and we allow it to find its natural place within our being. Easier said than done. I do not want to minimize the difficulty of that, but it can be in its proper place. It can be a very interesting and rewarding practice. And
I want to thank you, and this is my life. I know they're going to call me for the order from my husband for his supplies any second. So thank you for everything. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you for
I will
participating.
try.
Thank you for participating so fully, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'll just add that I was surprised when some imagery just started popping into my mind. I wasn't asking for imagery or asking questions or anything, but I just started having imagery. So that was kind of interesting. Do you suggest that if you have a powerful image that you go back to it and meditate on it, or just let it go, just let it float on through and ignore it? And
There's no hard or fast rule on that. The sort of rule of thumb in most of this is to let any kind of thought, feeling, or perception, including mental imagery, pass. You don't
right.
push it away, but you don't follow it either. You just let it come and let it go. But as I said, you can certainly, when you come out of the meditation, you can jot it down on a notepad next to you, and then you can return to it deliberately in a meditation.
Mhm.
If it's sufficiently interesting, in other words, it's sort of like you kind of table it at that moment when it arises, and then when you're in a more sort of cognitive space, you evaluate it, and if it seems interesting, then you might want to work with it. However, this is not to deny that there could be sudden insights that are, I mean, Albert Einstein said that he did not realize the theory of relativity through rational discursive thought. It occurred to him in a flash of intuition.
Mhm.
Now, if he had been meditating and he'd had that flash and he had said, like, go back to the breath, ignore that, and then later he gets off the mat and he says, like, now, what was this? There was something that came up in the meditation. I don't know what it was. You know, no. So if it feels really big and important, then I would say, as we were practicing this evening, that has now become the predominant element within your field of awareness, and observe it. Go into it, let it unfold its nature, and see what it is.
Okay.
The reason this is called insight meditation is not so that it generates mental insights, like little aphorisms, little sayings, but so that we see into the nature of our own experience.
Ah.